The clock on the wall of the Gilded Note restaurant read 7:15 p.m. Lily Chen wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead as she balanced 3 plates of seared scallops on her left arm. The kitchen was chaos tonight, with Chef Bernard bellowing orders and line cooks scrambling to keep up with the demand. It was Friday, always their busiest night, but tonight was special. The mayor was hosting his annual charity fundraiser, and half the city's power players were scattered throughout the dining room. "Order up for table 12. Chef Bernard shouted, sliding another masterpiece of culinary art onto the pass. Lily nodded, carefully setting down the scallops at table 9 before hurrying back to collect the new dish. Her feet ached in the sensible black shoes she'd bought secondhand last month. 10 hours into her double shift, and she still had 4 more to go. "You're doing great, Lily," whispered Rose, the head waitress, as they passed each other. Rose had been working at the Gilded Note for almost 20 years and had taken Lily under her wing when she started 3 years ago. "Just breathe through the chaos," Lily smiled gratefully. The Gilded Note wasn't just any restaurant. With its crystal chandeliers, antique furnishings, and prices that made her monthly rent look like pocket change, it catered exclusively to the city's elite. Politicians, business tycoons, celebrities. They all came here not just for the exquisite food, but for the atmosphere of exclusivity and for the music. The centerpiece of the main dining room was a magnificent grand piano. Every night, accomplished musicians took turns filling the space with classical melodies that floated above the quiet murmur of important conversations. The music was as much a part of the Gilded Note's reputation as its famous lobster bisque. As Lily delivered the roasted duck to table 12, she glanced at the piano. Tonight, the scheduled performer was Anton Riviera, a celebrated pianist who had recently returned from a European tour. The guests were particularly excited, many having mentioned his name when making their reservations. But something was wrong. The piano sat empty, its polished surface reflecting the warm glow of the chandeliers above. Mr. Thompson, the restaurant manager, was pacing nearby, phone pressed to his ear, his usually composed face twisted with worry. Lily completed her rounds, refilling water glasses and clearing empty plates, all while keeping one eye on the growing tension around the piano. The mayor had arrived with his entourage of city officials and wealthy donors, taking their seats at the large table reserved in the center of the room. Their expectant glances toward the empty piano made Mr. Thompson's pacing more frantic. Finally, after ending his call, Mr. Thompson hurried over to speak with Mr. Harrington, the owner of the Gilded Note. Lily couldn't hear their conversation, but the grim expressions told her everything she needed to know. Something had happened to tonight's entertainment. "What's going on?" Lily whispered to Rose as they met at the service station. "Anton's sick. Food poisoning from some street vendor he tried this afternoon. Ironic for a man who eats here regularly," Rose said, arranging fresh silverware on her tray. "Thompson's called every pianist in his contact list, but nobody's available on such short notice." Lily felt a pang of sympathy for Mr. Thompson. The Gilded Note prided itself on perfection, and an evening without music during the mayor's fundraiser would be considered a significant failure. "Ladies," Mr. Thompson hissed as he approached them, "please ensure the mayor's party has everything they need. Mr. Harrington is trying to smooth things over, but they're getting restless." The mayor specifically mentioned looking forward to tonight's performance. "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. As Lily approached the mayor's table with a bottle of their finest champagne, she could feel the undercurrent of disappointment. The conversation was stilted, the laughter forced. Mr. Harrington hovered nearby, his usual confident demeanor replaced with thinly veiled panic. "Surely there must be someone who could step in," the mayor was saying. "The evening feels incomplete without music." "I assure you, Mayor Chen, we're doing everything possible," Mr. Harrington replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Perhaps we could arrange for some recorded music until—" "Recorded?" One of the donors scoffed. "Howard, I didn't donate $10,000 to listen to a recording. The live music is part of the Gilded Note's charm." Lily carefully poured champagne, trying to be invisible as the tension rose. As she moved around the table, a memory surfaced, of her childhood home, of her grandmother's hands guiding her own over piano keys, of the hours she spent playing after her grandmother passed away, finding solace in the music when words failed her. Before she could stop herself, Lily spoke. I could play, sir? The words hung in the air. Several heads turned toward her, expressions ranging from surprise to amusement. Mr. Harrington looked at her as if she'd grown a second head. I beg your pardon? He said, his voice tight. Lily's heart hammered in her chest, but she stood straighter. I can play the piano, sir. Mr. Thompson had appeared at Mr. Harrington's side, his eyes wide with alarm. Lily, please return to your duties. We'll handle this situation. But the mayor had already taken interest. You're a pianist? He asked, studying her with new curiosity. Yes, sir. Lily clutched the champagne bottle tighter. I've played since I was 5. One of the businessmen at the table chuckled. Howard, let the girl try. What do we have to lose at this point? If nothing else, it might be entertaining. Lily felt her cheeks flush at the condescension in his tone. But she kept her eyes on Mr. Harrington, whose expression had shifted from shock to desperate calculation. What can you play? He asked finally. Bach, Chopin, Liszt, Debussy. Lily listed some of the composers whose works had kept her company through lonely nights in her small apartment. The same composers whose music filled this room every evening while she served dishes she could never afford to eat. Mr. Harrington exchanged glances with the mayor, who gave a small nod. One piece, Mr. Harrington said firmly. If it's not up to our standards, we'll find another solution. The whispers had already started spreading through the restaurant. Heads turned, watching as Lily handed the champagne bottle to a wide-eyed Rose. What are you doing? Rose whispered urgently. Are you sure about this? Lily wasn't sure. Her hands were shaking and her mouth had gone dry. She played for herself, in the privacy of her apartment, or sometimes at the community center when it was empty. Never for an audience like this, people who attended symphony galas and private concerts, who could recognize a missed note or a fumbled passage. But something inside her, a voice that sounded like her grandmother's, urged her forward. As Lily walked toward the piano, the dining room fell into curious silence. She could feel every eye on her, judging the waitress in her simple black uniform, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, her hands red from carrying hot plates and washing glasses. Mr. Thompson pulled out the bench for her with a tight smile that clearly said, Don't embarrass us. Lily sat down, adjusting the bench's height. The keys before her were immaculate, gleaming ivory and ebony, inviting her touch. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. What should she play? Something impressive to show her technical ability? Something subtle to ease into the performance? Her grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, Play what you feel, little one. Lily opened her eyes and began. The opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated through the restaurant. She started softly, her fingers reacquainting themselves with the weight of a professional grand piano, so different from her second-hand upright, with its slightly sticky E-flat key. The piece began its gentle climb, and Lily let herself be carried with it. The restaurant, the staring guests, Mr. Harrington's critical gaze, all faded away. There was only the music, the beautiful melancholy of moonlight captured in sound. As the piece reached its crescendo, Lily's body swayed slightly with the emotion of it. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, coaxing both power and delicacy from the instrument. The harmonies resonated through the room, filling every corner with shimmering sound. When the final notes faded into silence, Lily remained still for a moment, eyes closed, letting the last vibrations dissipate. Then, slowly, she became aware of her surroundings again. The restaurant was completely silent. She looked up, her heart pounding, to find every face turned toward her in astonishment. Mr. Harrington stood frozen by the mayor's table, his mouth slightly open. Mr. Thompson clutched a menu to his chest as if it were a shield. Then the mayor stood and began to applaud. The sound broke the spell, and suddenly the entire restaurant erupted in enthusiastic applause. Lily felt her face grow warm with a blush of surprise and pleasure. Extraordinary, the mayor called out. Absolutely extraordinary. Mr. Harrington hurried to the piano, his previous skepticism replaced by barely contained excitement. You never mentioned you could play like this, he said in a low voice, smiling for the benefit of onlookers. You never asked. Sir, Lily replied simply. His eyebrows shot up. But then he laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed his usually severe face. Well, I'm asking now. Would you continue? The entire evening if you're willing. Before Lily could answer, the mayor approached. Young lady, you've saved the night. What else can you play for us?
Looking around at the eager faces, feeling the unfamiliar warmth of appreciation, instead of the usual indifference, Lily nodded. I know quite a lot, sir. What would you like to hear? As requests began pouring in from around the room, Lily caught Rose's eye across the restaurant. The older waitress was beaming with pride, giving her a subtle thumbs up. For the first time since starting at the Gilded Note, Lily felt truly seen. Not as a server, invisible except when needed, but as a person with talent and value beyond carrying plates and taking orders. She flexed her fingers, selected the next piece from the growing list of requests, and began to play again, unaware that this night would change the course of her life forever. The second piece Lily played was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Her fingers danced across the keys with growing confidence as the familiar melody filled the restaurant. She'd played this piece hundreds of times in her tiny apartment, but never on an instrument like this. The grand piano responded to her touch with a richness that made her heart swell. As she played, Lily noticed something strange happening in the dining room. The usual buzz of conversation had completely stopped. Forks were set down mid-bite. Servers stood motionless with trays balanced on their palms. Even the kitchen staff had emerged from behind the swinging doors, crowding the entrance to witness what was happening. Everyone was listening. Really listening. When she finished the nocturne, the applause was immediate and thunderous. Several guests rose to their feet, including the mayor and his entire party. Another, someone called from across the room. Play Beethoven, suggested another voice. Requests flew at her from all directions, and Lily found herself smiling. A real smile, not the practiced one she used when asking if someone wanted freshly ground pepper. She chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and as the haunting first movement began, she noticed Mr. Thompson signaling the other servers to continue their duties. But no one moved. Not even Rose, who never broke the rules. They all remained transfixed as Lily played, their faces showing the same wonder as the guests they served. By the third piece, word had somehow spread beyond the Gilded Note's walls. People began appearing at the restaurant's entrance, asking if they could just stand in the back and listen. Mr. Harrington, who typically enforced the restaurant's strict reservation-only policy, was nodding and waving them in, too caught up in the moment to refuse. During a brief pause between pieces, while Lily sipped water that Rose had thoughtfully brought her, the mayor approached the piano. "Young lady," he said warmly, "you've transformed what could have been a disaster into something magical." He lowered his voice slightly. "I'm curious, how does someone with your talent end up serving tables?" The question wasn't asked unkindly, but Lily felt her cheeks warm. She was used to being invisible to people like the mayor, and now he was genuinely interested in her story. "Life doesn't always go as planned, sir," she answered simply. "Music schools are expensive." Understanding flickered across his face. "And yet you kept playing." "I couldn't stop if I tried," Lily admitted. "It's like breathing." The mayor nodded, then turned to address the room, which instantly fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing something extraordinary tonight." His voice carried easily through the space. "This young woman has reminded us that remarkable talent can be found in the most unexpected places." He raised his glass. "To Lily Chen, who has made our fundraiser unforgettable." To Lily. The cheer echoed around the room. Overwhelmed by the attention, Lily turned back to the keys. Music had always been her refuge, the place where she felt most herself. She began to play Liszt's Liebestraum, letting the music speak for her. As she played, she noticed a woman at a corner table watching her intently. Unlike the other guests who were swept up in the emotional experience of the music, this woman seemed to be studying Lily's technique. Her sharp eyes followed every movement of Lily's hands, her head occasionally tilting at particularly difficult passages. When Lily finished, the woman didn't applaud with the others. Instead, she wrote something in a small notebook before catching Lily's eye and giving her a single deliberate nod. "Who is that?" Lily whispered to Rose, who had appeared at her side with more water. Rose glanced over and her eyes widened slightly. "That's Victoria Winters. She's the director of the Westmore Conservatory." Lily nearly dropped her water glass. The Westmore Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. She dreamed of studying there since she was 12, had even applied 3 times. Each rejection letter was still tucked in a drawer in her apartment, reminders of the doors that remained closed to her. She never comes here, Rose continued. Wonder what brought her in tonight of all nights. Before Lily could respond, Mr. Harrington approached, practically glowing with excitement. Lily, this is remarkable. Simply remarkable. He clasped his hands together. The guests are raving. The mayor just told me this is the best entertainment we've ever had, and he's been coming here for 15 years. Lily smiled, still watching Victoria Winters out of the corner of her eye. I'd like you to continue playing for the rest of the evening, Mr. Harrington said. We'll pay you what we would have paid Anton, of course. And perhaps... He hesitated, clearly struck by a new idea. Perhaps we could discuss a more permanent arrangement? Not to replace your waitressing position, but in addition to it. Before Lily could answer, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A man in an expensive suit was arguing with the host, his voice rising above the pleasant hum of the restaurant. I don't care if you're full. Do you know who I am? The host, a usually unflappable young man named Paul, was trying his best to calm the situation. Sir, we're at capacity tonight, but I'd be happy to book you a table for tomorrow. Tomorrow isn't good enough. I brought an important client here specifically to hear Anton Riviera. Mr. Harrington excused himself hurriedly to deal with the situation, leaving Lily at the piano. She took the moment to catch her breath and look around the room that had transformed from a place where she worked to a place where she belonged. Guests who had never bothered to learn her name were now pointing her out to their companions. Staff members who'd barely acknowledged her beyond work necessities were beaming with reflected pride. It was as if she'd been invisible all these years and had suddenly materialized before their eyes. The feeling was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. The man at the entrance was still making a scene, his voice growing louder. I've been coming here for 20 years. This is unacceptable. Lily recognized him now. Richard Bennett, a real estate developer known for his temper and influence. She'd served his table many times, enduring his impatience and condescension. Perhaps I can help, came a new voice, smooth and authoritative. Victoria Winters had risen from her table and approached the entrance. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her posture suggested someone used to commanding attention. Mr. Bennett, she continued, you came to hear exceptional piano music, did you not? Bennett blinked at her. Victoria? I didn't know you were here. Then you're in luck, Victoria said, ignoring his question. Tonight's performance surpasses even Anton's considerable talents. She gestured toward Lily. I suggest you find space at the bar and listen. Your client will thank you. Bennett seemed taken aback by this assessment from someone whose opinion clearly mattered to him. He glanced toward Lily with new interest, then nodded curtly to the host. We'll take whatever you have. As Paul led Bennett and his client to the only available space, 2 stools at the far end of the bar, Victoria made her way to the piano. Don't stop on my account, she said to Lily. In fact, I'd like to hear what else you can do. There was a challenge in her voice that made Lily's pulse quicken. This wasn't just a request from a guest. It was an evaluation from someone who knew exactly what to listen for. Lily nodded and turned back to the piano. What should she play? Something to showcase technical skill? Something emotional? She settled on Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a piece with enough complexity to demonstrate ability while still being accessible to the general audience. As she played, Lily was acutely aware of Victoria watching her, analyzing every nuance of her performance. But rather than making her nervous, the scrutiny pushed her to dig deeper, to find the core of what the music was meant to express. When the piece ended, Victoria didn't speak immediately. She stood silently, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she asked, "Where did you study?" The question Lily had been dreading. "I didn't," she admitted. "Not formally." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "Self-taught?" "My grandmother started teaching me when I was 5. After she passed away, I just kept going. Community center pianos, books from the library, online tutorials when I could access them." Lily's fingers trailed lightly over the keys, and I'd listened to performances online, trying to understand what made them special. "Interesting." Victoria's tone revealed nothing. "And you work here as a waitress?" It wasn't a question, but Lily nodded anyway. "For 3 years now. Do you know who I am?" "Yes, Ms. Winters." "Then you know what I'm going to ask next." Lily's heart began to race. Was this really happening? I think so. Play something else for me. Something that matters to you personally. Without hesitation, Lily began playing Debussy's Reverie. It was the last piece her grandmother had taught her before the illness took hold, before the hospital bills began piling up, before music became both Lily's escape and her most painful reminder of what she'd lost. She poured everything into the performance, not trying to impress with technical flourishes, but simply expressing what the music meant to her. The gentle, dreamy quality of the piece filled the restaurant, and Lily closed her eyes, transported back to her grandmother's small living room with its faded wallpaper and the upright piano that was always slightly out of tune. When she finished, the room was so quiet she could hear the soft hiss of the kitchen's pilot light. She opened her eyes to find Victoria still watching her, but the woman's expression had softened almost imperceptibly. You've applied to Westmore before. Again, not a question. 3 times, Lily confirmed. And we rejected you 3 times. Lily nodded, fighting to keep her expression neutral. Those rejections had crushed her, each one chipping away at her dream until she'd finally tucked it away, focusing instead on the practical matter of survival. Victoria tapped her notebook against her palm, seeming to come to a decision. We made a mistake. For a moment, Lily wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. I'm sorry. The conservatory evaluates applicants based on training, recommendations, competition placements, evidence of both talent and dedication. Victoria gestured around the restaurant. We look for the traditional markers of potential. Sometimes we miss what's right in front of us. She opened her notebook and wrote something down, then tore out the page and handed it to Lily. Come to this address tomorrow at 10. Don't be late. It was the address of the Westmore Conservatory, with Victoria's direct office number written beneath it. Ms. Winters, Lily began, but Victoria cut her off with a small shake of her head. Tomorrow, Ms. Chen, we have much to discuss. With that, she returned to her table, leaving Lily clutching the paper like a lifeline. Rose appeared at her side, eyes wide. Did Victoria Winters just give you her card? What did she say? Lily looked up, still dazed. I think she wants me to audition. For Westmore? Rose gasped. Lily, that's amazing. Mr. Harrington returned, looking pleased with himself for having placated Richard Bennett. Crisis averted. Now where were we? Yes, discussing your future here at the Gilded Note. Lily glanced down at the paper in her hand, then back up at her boss. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something she'd nearly forgotten. Hope. Actually, Mr. Harrington, she said with newfound confidence, I think my future just got a lot more interesting. Lily barely slept that night. She kept replaying the events at the Gilded Note in her mind, the stunned faces of the guests, the unexpected applause, Victoria Winters' intense scrutiny, and those life-changing words. We made a mistake. Her 1-bedroom apartment felt especially small as she paced between her bed and the second-hand upright piano that took up most of her living room wall. The old Baldwin had been her grandmother's final gift to her, purchased with the last of her savings. Its middle C stuck slightly and the finish was worn in places, but to Lily it was priceless. She sat down and played softly, mindful of her neighbors despite the late hour. Her fingers moved through familiar exercises, scales, and arpeggios, the foundations her grandmother had drilled into her from the beginning. Technique matters, Grandmother Chen would say in her accented English, tapping Lily's wrists when they dropped too low. But heart matters more. Anyone can play notes. Not everyone can make them speak. Lily smiled at the memory, her fingers transitioning into Bach's Prelude in C major. Tomorrow could change everything, or it could be another disappointment to add to the collection. She glanced at her small bookshelf where 3 identical envelopes sat in a neat row. Each contained a rejection letter from Westmore Conservatory. She had memorized the polite phrasing, while we appreciate your interest. Many qualified applicants. Unable to offer you admission at this time. What would make tomorrow different? Her phone buzzed with a text from Rose. Can't sleep? Me neither. So excited for you. Text me everything tomorrow. Lily smiled. Rose had insisted on covering Lily's morning shift so she could meet with Victoria, brushing aside Lily's protest with, Don't you dare say no. This is your chance, she replied with a quick thanks again. nervous but ready, before setting her alarm. Whatever happened tomorrow, she was grateful that at least one good thing had come from tonight. People at work finally saw her as more than just a waitress. Morning arrived too quickly. Lily woke before her alarm, her stomach in knots. She'd laid out her outfit the night before, the best clothes she owned, which wasn't saying much. A simple navy blue dress, sensible black flats, and her grandmother's jade pendant for luck. The Westmore Conservatory was located in the city's cultural district, housed in a stately stone building with ivy climbing its walls. Lily had walked past it countless times, always pausing to look up at its imposing facade before continuing on her way. Today she would actually go inside. As she approached the entrance, she spotted a familiar figure on the steps. Victoria Winters stood conversing with an older man, whose wild white hair gave him the look of a mad scientist. They both turned as Lily approached. Right on time, Victoria noted with approval. Good. Punctuality matters in music as much as in life. She gestured to her companion. This is Professor Nikolai Petrov, head of our piano department. The man's bushy eyebrows rose as he studied Lily. So, this is your mysterious discovery, Victoria? She doesn't look like a pianist, Victoria's lips thinned. And what does a pianist look like, Nikolai? He shrugged. Point taken. Well, girl, Victoria has made quite extraordinary claims about you. Shall we see if they're justified? Without waiting for an answer, he turned and entered the building. Victoria gave Lily an encouraging nod and they followed him inside. The conservatory's interior was even more impressive than Lily had imagined. The entrance hall featured marble floors and a sweeping staircase. The walls were lined with photographs of famous alumni and visiting artists. Lily caught glimpses of practice rooms through half-open doors, hearing snippets of violin, clarinet, and piano as students prepared for their day. They led her to a large performance space, not the main concert hall, but a smaller recital room with a magnificent Steinway grand piano at its center. The room was empty except for the three of them, their footsteps echoing as they approached the instrument. This is one of our teaching spaces, Victoria explained. We use it for master classes and student recitals. Professor Petrov had already seated himself in the front row. Play something, he commanded, his accent more pronounced than it had been outside. Something technically challenging. Lily approached the piano, her heart racing. This instrument would be even more responsive than the one at the Gilded. Note, she adjusted the bench and took a deep breath. She began with Chopin's revolutionary etude in a piece that demanded both technical precision and emotional intensity. Her fingers flew across the keys, navigating the rapid left-hand passages while bringing out the melody with her right. She lost herself in the music, forgetting momentarily where she was and why she was playing. When she finished, she looked up to find Professor Petrov leaning forward in his seat, his expression inscrutable. Again, he said, but this time, play it as if you're telling a story, not showing off your technique. Lily blinked, taken aback by the critique. She'd thought her performance was emotional, but clearly he wanted something different. She began again, focusing less on perfect execution and more on the revolutionary spirit behind the piece, the anger, the hope, the defiance. This time when she finished, Professor Petrov nodded slightly. Better. Now something completely different, something gentle. She chose Satie's Gymnopédie No. 1, letting the simple, haunting melody breathe. She played it slower than usual, emphasizing its dreamlike quality. When the final notes faded, Professor Petrov turned to Victoria. She has good instincts. Raw but good. As I told you, Victoria replied. You mentioned she has no formal training? He directed this question to Victoria, not Lily, as if she weren't present, self-taught, with some early instruction from her grandmother. Professor Petrov made a non-committal sound and finally addressed Lily directly. Your technique is unorthodox. You hold tension in your shoulders. Your pedaling is intuitive rather than precise. He paused. But you have musicality that cannot be taught. That is rare, even among our scholarship students. Lily wasn't sure if this was a compliment or criticism. Thank you, I think. Victoria smiled slightly at her response. Nikolai doesn't give praise easily. This is high praise indeed. I didn't say I was praising her. The professor grumbled, but there was no real bite to his words. I merely observed that she has potential. Enough potential for our mid-year scholarship program? Victoria pressed. Lily's breath caught. Scholarship? They were actually discussing a scholarship. Professor Petrov studied Lily thoughtfully. It would be a significant adjustment. She would need intensive coaching to correct her technical issues, theory classes to fill the gaps in her knowledge. He turned to Lily. "How old are you, girl?" 26, Lily answered. Older than our typical students." He rubbed his chin. "Can you read music?" "Yes, sir. My grandmother taught me, and I studied on my own after she passed." "And how do you support yourself now?" "Victoria mentioned you work at a restaurant." "Yes, the Gilded Note. I'm a waitress there." He nodded as if confirming something to himself. It would mean giving that up. "Our program is demanding, full-time, with practice requirements of at least 4 hours daily, plus theory classes, music history, ensemble work." Lily's mind raced. Give up her job? How would she pay rent, buy food? As if reading her thoughts, Victoria interjected. "The scholarship covers tuition and provides a modest stipend for living expenses. It wouldn't be luxurious, but you could focus on your studies without distraction." Lily struggled to find words. "This is very unexpected." Professor Petrov stood suddenly. "Victoria, a word in private?" Without waiting for a response, he walked to the far end of the room. Victoria touched Lily's arm briefly. "Stay here. Play if you'd like." She followed the professor. Left alone with the Steinway, Lily let her fingers drift over the keys without pressing them. A scholarship to Westmore. The thing she'd dreamed of for years, suddenly within reach. But it would mean leaving behind the life she'd built, modest as it was. The steady income. The co-workers who had become friends. She began playing softly without thinking, the piece her grandmother had composed for her 10th birthday. It wasn't complex or technically challenging, just a simple, heartfelt melody that always calmed her when decisions loomed. Across the room, Victoria and Professor Petrov were engaged in an intense discussion. Though Lily couldn't hear their words, their body language suggested disagreement. The professor gestured emphatically while Victoria remained composed but firm. Finally, they returned. Professor Petrov's expression had softened somewhat. "Ms. Chen," Victoria began formally, "we would like to offer you a place in our mid-year scholarship program. Beginning next month." Lily's heart leaped, but before she could speak, Professor Petrov held up his hand. "With conditions," he added. "You will need remedial work in theory and technique. You will have weekly private lessons with me, in addition to your regular coursework. These will not be pleasant. I am not known for my patience with technical flaws." "He means he'll be harder on you than on the other students," Victoria translated with a small smile. "And," the professor continued, ignoring the interruption, "you will perform at our winter showcase in December." Lily's eyes widened. "But that's only 3 months away." "Precisely." His gaze was challenging. "The showcase is attended by patrons, critics, and industry professionals. If you are to join our program outside the normal admission cycle, on a full scholarship no less, you must prove that the exception is justified." Victoria's expression suggested she didn't entirely agree with this condition, but she remained silent. "Do you accept these terms?" Professor Petrov asked. It was overwhelming. 3 months to prepare for a major performance, intensive remedial studies, weekly sessions with this intimidating man who seemed to find her both promising and problematic. But then Lily thought of her grandmother, who had sacrificed so much to nurture her talent, who had believed in her when no one else did, who had told her in her final days, "Music is your gift to the world, little one. Don't bury it." "I accept," Lily said firmly. Professor Petrov nodded once. "Good. We begin tomorrow, 8 o'clock sharp. Do not be late." With that, he turned and left the room. Victoria let out a breath. "Well, that went better than expected." "Really?" Lily couldn't hide her surprise. Nikolai rarely takes on special projects. The fact that he's willing to work with you personally speaks volumes. Victoria sat beside Lily on the bench. "He sees what I saw last night, extraordinary raw talent. But he's right about the challenges ahead. This won't be easy." "I've never expected easy," Lily replied. "Just possible." Victoria smiled, a real smile that transformed her usually stern features. "I believe you'll do more than just succeed here, Lily. I believe you'll excel." She stood. "Come, there's paperwork to complete. And then you have some significant life changes to arrange." As they left the recital room, Lily glanced back at the Steinway. 3 months ago, she'd received her 3rd rejection letter from Westmore. 3 days ago, she'd been a waitress whose greatest ambition was to someday save enough for community college courses. Now, she was about to become a scholarship student at one of the most prestigious music conservatories in the country, all because she'd found the courage to speak up when that piano sat empty. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another text from Rose. "Well, don't keep me in suspense." Lily smiled as she typed her reply. "You're looking at Westmore's newest scholarship student." The response came immediately. "Ah! Drinks tonight to celebrate. I'm so proud of you." As Lily followed Victoria down the hallway, past practice rooms filled with dedicated musicians honing their craft, she felt something settle inside her, a certainty that she was finally where she belonged. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles Professor Petrov might throw in her path, she would face them. Because for the first time in years, she was walking toward her dream instead of away from it. 2 months into her studies at Westmore, Lily stared at the sheet music before her frustration mounting. It was 11:30 p.m., and the practice room lights cast harsh shadows across the grand piano. She'd been working on the same passage of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 for 3 hours straight, and it still wasn't right. Professor Petrov's voice echoed in her mind. Again. Your left hand is sloppy. Again. Your rhythm is inconsistent. Again. Where is the passion? You play like an accountant tallying numbers. She flexed her fingers, which were stiff with fatigue, and tried once more. This time she made it through the difficult passage without technical errors, but she could hear what the professor meant. It sounded correct but lifeless. With a sigh, Lily checked the time. The practice rooms were supposed to close at midnight, but the night janitor, Dave, had taken to forgetting to check this particular room during his rounds. He'd caught her practicing late one night during her first week and, instead of kicking her out, had simply said, "Dedication deserves respect," before quietly closing the door. The scholarship that had seemed like a miracle 2 months ago now felt like both a blessing and a curse. The stipend barely covered her rent and basic expenses. Her tiny apartment, once a sanctuary, was now just a place to collapse into exhausted sleep before starting again the next day. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rose. "Still alive? Haven't seen you in weeks." Guilt pricked at Lily. She'd barely kept in touch with her friends from the Gilded Note. Between classes, practice sessions, theory lessons, and private instruction with Professor Petrov, she barely had time to eat, let alone socialize. "Still breathing," she texted back. "Drowning in Liszt. Rain check on dinner?" Rose's reply came quickly. "You've rain checked 3 times. We miss you. Life update?" Lily stared at the screen, unsure how to compress the whirlwind of the past months into a text message. How could she explain the exhilaration of finally pursuing her passion, alongside the crushing pressure to prove herself worthy? The joy of being surrounded by music all day, contrasted with the isolation of being older than most students and coming from such a different background. "It's complicated," she finally wrote. "Amazing and terrible at the same time. Winter showcase in 3 weeks and I'm nowhere near ready." "You'll be brilliant," Rose replied. "But you need a break." "Sunday brunch? Non-negotiable. I'll bring muffins to your place if I have to." Despite her exhaustion, Lily smiled. "Deal Sunday, but I picked the place." Setting her phone aside, she turned back to the piano. 1 more hour, she promised herself. Then sleep. The next morning arrived too quickly. Lily hurried across the conservatory's courtyard, her messenger bag heavy with sheet music and theory books. She was running late for her private lesson with Professor Petrov, something that had never happened before and would certainly not be received well. As she rushed up the stairs to the faculty wing, she nearly collided with a tall, elegant woman coming down. "I'm so sorry," Lily exclaimed, stepping back. "Quite all right," the woman replied with a slight smile. Her British accent was crisp, her silver hair immaculately styled. "You must be Lily Chen. Nikolai has mentioned you." Lily blinked in surprise. "Yes, I am." "And you're—" "Isabel Montgomery," she extended her hand. "I teach advanced interpretation and serve as artistic director for the showcase." Lily's stomach dropped. This was the legendary pianist who had performed with symphonies around the world before retiring to teach at Westmore. And she was the one who would ultimately judge Lily's showcase performance. "It's an honor to meet you, Professor Montgomery," Lily said, shaking her hand. I've listened to your recording of the Tchaikovsky concerto countless times. Isabel's eyebrows rose slightly. Have you? Well, that's quite lovely to hear. I'm looking forward to your showcase performance. Nikolai rarely champions outside students, so you must be something special. Before Lily could respond, a voice called from above. Ms. Chen, you are late. Professor Petrov stood at the top of the stairs, his wild white hair seeming even more untamed than usual, his expression thunderous. I should let you go, Isabel said with a knowing smile. Do try to survive him. He's brilliant but lacks patience. As Isabel continued down the stairs, Lily hurried up to face her mentor's displeasure. Sorry, Professor. The bus was delayed and excuses waste time, he interrupted. We have much to do and now less time to do it. Come. He led her to his studio, a large room dominated by two grand pianos facing each other. The walls were lined with books, records, and framed photographs of Professor Petrov with famous musicians and composers. Unlike other faculty offices that felt sterile and academic, his space breathed music, lived in, slightly cluttered, but purposeful. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to one of the pianos. Play your showcase program from beginning to end. No stopping, no matter what happens. Lily took a deep breath. Her program consisted of Bach's Prelude and Fugue in a minor, Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata, and Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, a challenging lineup designed to demonstrate both technical skill and interpretive range. As she began the Bach, she focused on precision, knowing the professor valued accuracy in Baroque music above all else. The prelude flowed smoothly, her fingers finding the intricate patterns with practiced ease. But as she transitioned into the fugue, fatigue from her late-night practice session began to take its toll. She missed a subtle voicing, emphasizing the wrong melodic line. Professor Petrov made no comment, but she saw his slight frown from the corner of her eye. Pushing through, she finished the Bach and moved directly into the Beethoven. The familiar opening chords of the Pathétique resonated through the room. This piece had always spoken to Lily. Its dramatic contrasts between despair and hope mirrored much of her own life's journey. She lost herself in the music, forgetting for a moment that she was being evaluated. When she reached the Liszt, however, the troublesome passage loomed. She tried to stay focused, to channel the passion and fire the piece demanded, but her fingers betrayed her. The notes became tangled, the rhythm faltered, and she very nearly stopped. But remembering the professor's instruction, she pushed through, grimacing at the mistakes. When she finally finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Professor Petrov sat perfectly still, his fingers steepled under his chin. What do you think? He asked finally. Lily was caught off guard by the question. He usually launched directly into criticism. I think. The Bach was mostly clean but lacked proper voicing in the fugue. The Beethoven felt right emotionally, but I rushed some of the transitional passages. And the Liszt, she sighed. The Liszt needs a lot more work, he nodded slowly. Accurate self-assessment. But you missed something crucial. What? She asked, bracing herself. You were tired. Too tired to play well. It wasn't accusatory, merely factual. How late were you practicing last night? Lily hesitated, then admitted, until about 1 a.m. And the night before? About the same. Professor Petrov made a disapproving sound. This is not how great musicians are made. Ms. Chen, grinding yourself down helps no one. But the showcase will be a disaster if you continue this way. He rose and walked to a small kitchenette in the corner of his studio. Tea? Confused by this unexpected turn, Lily nodded. As he prepared 2 cups, he continued speaking. When I was your age, younger actually, I practiced until my fingers bled. I thought sacrifice meant suffering. He handed her a steaming cup. It took me years to understand that the body and mind must be partners in music, not adversaries. Lily sipped the strong, sweet tea, surprised by this glimpse of her mentor's past. But I'm behind the other students, she protested. I have so much ground to make up. Yes and no. He sat across from her. Technically, yes. Your theory needs work. Your technique has flaws from years of self-teaching. But musically? He shook his head. When you played the middle movement of the Beethoven just now, that came from somewhere authentic. Something many technically perfect students here lack entirely. He set down his cup. You cannot catch up by destroying yourself. Music is not a race. Lily stared into her tea, processing his words. What should I do then? The showcase is so soon. First you will sleep. Tonight no practice after 9 p.m. He held up a hand to silence her protest. Then tomorrow we adjust your program. Change my program? But there's no time to learn new pieces. Not change entirely. Simplify the list. Focus on playing it well rather than playing all of it. He looked at her intently, and add something personal. Something that reflects your journey. Like what? That piece you were playing when Victoria and I returned to the recital room during your audition. The simple melody. Your grandmother's composition, yes? Lily was startled. You remember that? I remember music that speaks truth, he said simply. It requires no virtuosity to touch the heart. Sometimes it is the opposite. But the showcase is supposed to demonstrate technical ability. That piece is so simple. The showcase, he interrupted, is meant to introduce you to our community. To show them who you are as a musician. Technical skill, yes, but also heart. Without that, you are just another pianist. Lily considered his words. The thought of playing her grandmother's piece in such a prestigious venue was both terrifying and somehow right. It was the core of her musical identity, where she had come from, what had sustained her through years of rejection and struggle. Okay, she agreed finally. I'll make the changes. Good. He stood, signaling the end of their conversation. Now go rest. We meet again tomorrow. As Lily packed up her music, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she belonged at Westmore after all. Outside the conservatory, the crisp autumn air filled her lungs. On impulse, instead of heading straight home to practice, she took a detour to a small park nearby. Sitting on a bench beneath trees blazing with fall colors, she called Rose. Is the world ending? Rose answered teasingly. You never call during practice hours. Lily laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised even herself. Maybe it is, or maybe it's just beginning. Want to get coffee? Now? Rose sounded shocked. Who are you and what have you done with my workaholic friend? I'm trying something new, Lily replied. It's called balance. An hour later, sitting across from Rose in their old favorite cafe, Lily felt more like herself than she had in months. As she recounted her conversation with Professor Petrov, she realized that somewhere in her desperate attempt to prove herself worthy of the opportunity she'd been given, she'd forgotten why she loved music in the first place. So this professor who's been torturing you for 2 months suddenly turns into a wise guru, Rose asked, stirring her latte. Plot twist, I know, right? But it makes sense. He's been pushing me because he sees something worth pushing. Lily wrapped her hands around her mug. I've been so focused on what I lack that I forgot what I bring to the table. Rose smiled. Which is what makes you special. Your crazy journey. Your grandmother. The fact that you taught yourself to play like that while serving entitled rich people their overpriced dinners. Exactly. Lily felt a new sense of purpose forming. The showcase isn't just about proving I can play difficult pieces. It's about showing them who I am. Now that, Rose said, raising her mug in a toast, is a performance I wouldn't miss for the world. For the first time since beginning at Westmore, Lily felt the pressure transform from crushing weight to energizing challenge. She wasn't just catching up anymore. She was charting her own course, one that honored both where she'd been and where she was going. The night of the winter showcase arrived faster than Lily could have imagined. Backstage at Westmore's grand concert hall, she peeked through the curtains at the gathering audience. The elegant space, with its warm wood paneling and perfect acoustics, was filling quickly. 300 seats, and from what she could see, nearly all of them would be occupied. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down the simple black dress she'd bought for the occasion, her first real splurge since receiving the scholarship. Rose had gone shopping with her, insisting that this moment deserved something special. Nervous? A voice asked from behind. Lily turned to find Isabel Montgomery watching her with a knowing smile. Terrified, Lily admitted. But ready, I think, Isabel nodded approvingly. Fear is natural, even necessary. It reminds us that what we're doing matters. She gestured toward the piano visible on stage. That instrument has been played by some of the greatest pianists of our time. Tonight it's yours. The thought was both intimidating and thrilling. Lily took a deep breath, centering herself. Professor Petrov told me about the program change, Isabel continued. Including your grandmother's composition was a bold choice. Do you think it was a mistake? Lily couldn't help asking. On the contrary, the showcase isn't an exam. It's an introduction. I'm curious to meet the real Lily Chen. With that, Isabel squeezed her shoulder gently and moved away to speak with other faculty members. Lily checked the time. 20 minutes until she would take the stage. As one of 8 featured performers, she was scheduled in the middle of the program. Not opening, not closing, but in what Professor Petrov had called the heart position. She found a quiet corner to sit and review her music one last time, not to practice, but to remind herself of the journey each piece represented. The Bach, with its mathematical precision that had challenged her to develop cleaner technique. The Beethoven, with its emotional depths that had connected so strongly to her own life experiences. The abbreviated list, showcasing the technical prowess she'd worked so hard to develop. And finally, her grandmother's simple composition, Lily's Lullaby, the piece that had started everything. A stagehand appeared. 5 minutes, Miss Chen. Lily nodded, gathering her music. As she made her way toward the stage entrance, she spotted Rose and, to her surprise, several of her former co-workers from the Gilded Note, including Mr. Harrington himself. They waved enthusiastically when they saw her, and Rose gave an exaggerated thumbs up that made Lily smile despite her nerves. The current performer, a violinist, finished to appreciative applause. After he took his bows and exited, there was a brief pause as stagehands adjusted the stage. Then Lily heard her name announced. Our next performer is pianist Lily Chen, a mid-year scholarship recipient studying with Professor Nikolai Petrov. Ms. Chen will be performing works by Bach, Beethoven, and Liszt, concluding with an original composition. Lily walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She made her way to the piano, adjusted the bench, and took a moment to steady herself before beginning. In the front row, she could see Victoria Winters and Professor Petrov watching intently. Victoria gave her an encouraging nod. The Bach prelude and fugue began cleanly, her fingers finding the precise patterns they had rehearsed countless times. As she navigated the complex counterpoint of the fugue, she focused on bringing out the distinct voices as Professor Petrov had taught her, making the separate melodic lines speak to each other in musical conversation. Transitioning to Beethoven's Pathétique, she allowed herself to sink deeper into the emotional landscape of the piece. The dramatic opening chords resonated throughout the hall, setting the stage for the journey from darkness to light that followed. By the time she reached the tender second movement, she had forgotten about the audience entirely, lost in the beauty of the music. The Liszt Hungarian Rhapsody came next, the piece that had caused her so much frustration. But tonight, her fingers danced through the challenging passages with newfound confidence. She played with fire and precision, the hours of practice translating into a performance that felt both controlled and spontaneous. When the final, thunderous chords of the Liszt faded, there was a moment of silence before enthusiastic applause broke out. Lily acknowledged it with a slight bow from her seated position but didn't rise. There was one more piece to play. As the applause quieted, she took a moment to gather herself. Then, looking directly at the audience for the first time, she spoke. My final piece tonight is very special to me. It was composed by my grandmother, Ming Chen, who gave me my first piano lessons when I was 5 years old. Her voice was steady, carrying clearly through the hall. She called it Lily's Lullaby. Though she had no formal musical training, she understood something essential about music that I'm still learning, that technical perfection means nothing without heart. Lily turned back to the piano and began to play the simple, heartfelt melody. The piece was short, barely 3 minutes, and lacked the complexity of her previous selections. But as the gentle notes filled the concert hall, she poured everything into it, her grandmother's love, her own journey from waitress to conservatory student, her struggles and triumphs of the past 3 months. The final notes lingered in the air, sweet and wistful. For a moment, the hall remained utterly silent. Then slowly, people began to rise to their feet. The applause built until it filled the space completely, washing over Lily in waves. She stood, taking her bows, her vision blurring slightly with unshed tears. In the front row, Professor Petrov was applauding vigorously, his usual stern expression replaced with unmistakable pride. Beside him, Victoria Winters was smiling broadly. And from the middle section, she could hear Rose and her other friends cheering loudly above the general applause. As she made her way backstage, she was met by Isabel Montgomery. "Well done," the older woman said warmly, "particularly the lullaby. Sometimes the simplest pieces require the most musicality to perform well." "Thank you," Lily replied, still catching her breath from the emotional experience. "I'd like you to consider something," Isabel continued. "Our spring tour. We select a few students each year to perform at community centers and schools throughout the state. Your story would resonate powerfully, especially with young people who might not see themselves as belonging in classical music." Lily was stunned. The spring tour was typically reserved for advanced students in their final year. "I'd be honored," she managed to say. Isabel smiled. "Excellent. We'll discuss details after the holiday break." Before Lily could fully process what had just happened, she was surrounded by her former co-workers from the Gilded Note. "All talking at once. You were incredible." "We're so proud of you. The restaurant hasn't been the same without you." Rose pushed her way through to give Lily a fierce hug. "I told you you'd be brilliant," she exclaimed. Everyone in that audience was completely blown away. Mr. Harrington stepped forward. "Ms. Chen, your performance was extraordinary. The Gilded Note would be honored if you'd consider playing for us again. As our featured pianist, of course, not as waitstaff." He handed her a business card. The pay would be quite substantial. Lily accepted the card, amused by the irony. 3 months ago, she had been invisible to this man except as someone to carry food to his customers. Now he was recruiting her as a performer. As the evening continued, more people approached. Students curious about the Waitress pianist they'd heard rumors about, faculty members offering congratulations, even a few patrons inquiring about private lessons. Later, at a small celebration in a nearby cafe with Rose and her friends, Lily finally had a moment to reflect on how far she had come. 6 months ago, she had been serving drinks and dreaming of a different life. 3 months ago, she had taken a chance by speaking up when a piano sat empty. Today, she had performed on one of the most prestigious stages in the city and been invited to join the spring tour. "Earth to Lily." Rose waved a hand in front of her face. "Where'd you go?" Lily smiled. "Just thinking about how quickly life can change. If I hadn't spoken up that night at the restaurant—" "But you did," Rose pointed out. "That's the whole point. You saw an opportunity and took it even though it was terrifying." "I'm glad you were all there tonight," Lily said, looking around at her friends. "You're part of this journey, too." As they chatted and laughed, Lily's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Professor Petrov, who had never contacted her outside of class before. "Your grandmother would be proud. Tomorrow 9 a.m. we begin work on your spring repertoire. The real work starts now." Lily smiled at his characteristic blend of praise and challenge. He was right. This wasn't an end point, but a beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more technical skills to master, more emotional depths to explore in the music. But something fundamental had shifted. She no longer felt like an imposter trying to catch up. She had found her voice, not just as a pianist, but as an artist with a unique story to tell. The following Monday, Lily found herself back at the practice rooms, working on a new piece for the spring tour. Outside her window, snow had begun to fall, covering the conservatory's grounds in a blanket of white. The practice room was warm, the piano responsive beneath her fingers. A knock at the door interrupted her. It was a young woman she recognized from her theory class, looking nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you," the student said hesitantly, "but I heard your performance at the showcase and, well, I'm struggling with my own piece for Professor Montgomery's class. I was wondering if you might have any advice." Lily recognized the uncertainty in the young woman's eyes, the same doubt she had carried for so long. She smiled and gestured to the bench beside her. "Of course," she said warmly. "Show me what you're working on." As the student began to play, Lily listened carefully, recognizing that her journey had come full circle. Once a waitress who had dreamed of becoming a student, she was now becoming a teacher as well, passing along not just what she had learned about music, but about courage, perseverance, and believing in yourself even when no one else does. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and inside, the music continued to grow, note by note, heart to heart. A reminder that extraordinary talent can be found in the most unexpected places, waiting for its moment to shine.